Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of The Big Picture from wherever you're watching us, whether it's on the continent, here in the country, or abroad. Big conversations today. No guests today. Well, we have a guest, but he's a guest, but from inside the house. And as usual, my name is John Allen Namu. As usual, it's been like that since birth. My name is John Allen Namu.
Check you forgetting your name. And me, as usual, I'm also Justine Wanda.
And in studio with us, we have fact checker and spoken word artist extraordinaire from the Africa Uncensored fact checking desk, Felix Modhoka. I'll let you know why he's here in a bit. Salimia watu Felix.
Hi, I'm Felix. I'm glad to be here.
Hi, my friend. For an artist, that's so it's so reserved.
Unamweka pressure, man.
Anafaanze na hello. Hizo za
Snap your fingers kusaidia.
hizo vitu nilisahau. Anyway, we've got a great show today for you, packed one, and we deliberately did not have a guest today because this is a heavy week, and I think everybody's kind of contemplating what's been going on across the country from last week. Last week was a super heavy week. But this week is heavy for different reasons. This obviously is the anniversary week since the June 25th protests of 2024 that changed this country forever. Now, Africa Uncensored, I should say me as well, right? Yeah, we've been working on a documentary, a retrospective documentary on the June 2024 protests. What happened? What led to it? What was behind it? I believe, and I might be biased because I was producing this, that it is a bracing watch. It's really one of those things that you want as a page marker in understanding what happened, where we are, and perhaps where we're going. It's called Souls on Fire. Take a look at the trailer.
I, William Samoei Ruto. Hii serikali hii, mimi nawaambia hii serikali ni ya mahasla.
Matumaini ya kila mtu. That's the reason why we voted this government.
To keep on lying and lying.
You are being taxed everywhere. You're not being told where the money is gonna go.
I stand to support this Finance Bill 2024.
As members of that opinion say aye. So the ayes have it.
The day has come, my brothers.
Watch him. We gotta watch him. We gotta watch him. Si walisema mambo ya Rivayala waliwacha.
Conversation this crucial was hijacked by dangerous people. But we cannot relax!
We gave you the best, somewhere to rest, but now you're moving against us. You're making a mess.
I'm here to address you. You must go. Ruto must go.
Souls on Fire, behind the 2024 protests, premiering on the 25th of June, in just 2 days. And by the way, shouts out to Steph Capella, whose song we sampled, Erosopa, which was one of those songs that we listened to quite a bit in the aftermath of the protests from last year. And, Justine, working on the documentary, working on the piece for the months that we've been working on it for has been, it's almost as if you're reliving some of those moments, but also like reflecting on the state of our country, right? And I was reminded of something that I believe it was Modoni Drama Queen who said was it you who said it? I can't remember whether it was you who reminded me of it, but she said in a TED Talk that you only build what you love, right? And I really thought about that question because right now, if I was to pose that question to you and you were to look across the scope of what's happening in Kenya, what do you think that is being built and the investment in it is one that's not just monetary or physical or mental, but it's also emotional in terms of love? What areas do you think that Kenyans are really investing their time, their effort, and their love in terms of perhaps a nation building project?
I think for us to go anywhere, we have to relook the soul of the nation. And I think that's the part that we need to piece together. What do we mean to each other? What does this country mean to us? What do we want our futures to look like? What do we want our now to look like? And I think the rebuilding process, rebuilding anything you love, you have to start with introspection. And I think that's what a lot of Kenyans are contending with. There's the bystander thing that people have done for a long time, or people have watched their parents do, or generations that came before. People are trying to shatter that image. A lot of people are questioning the points of prosperity that they had, if that was an illusion, or was it something that was actually worked on, or was it ever even fully addressed? So all those questions about who we are as people, for you to love yourself, you kind of have to be a little bit of a hater. You have to find those points where you're like, hey, hapo nilibant. Like you actually have to introspect, and I think that's a contention that a lot of Kenyans are having. Maybe we are outrospecting first, because we have to get every single person who, or like every single parts of the institutions that have been shattered, and we have to rebuild from the ground up. Because again, if you're rebuilding what you love, you have to make the foundations strong. Yes.
Same question, Felix. If you look across Kenya, what do you think the investment of love is in our country right now? Like, which areas do you see that watu wanapenda hii nchi, or wanafanya kitu because they really like the country, or the thing that they're doing, what it's going to do for the country? Where do you think you see that?
I'd say sports. We have great sportsmen and sportswomen in the country, from athletics to rugby to now we're having the BAL conference now we're having in Rwanda, and we're having a lot of basketballers coming up and everything. So I think the sports are really showing us, because even if they go there with poor standards, not being given adequate things to be able to help them in their practice, they're still there showing up, making sure they win for Kenya, raising our flag high. I think the sports and men and women have really showed us how we can show out for us Kenyans to be able to be patriotic of our country also. And also touching on Justin's point on introspection and souls. And also to us, the reason introspection is also a big thing is because we are a reflection of all of us. So if something is also happening to us or society, we ought to hold the mirror and look also inside and see we are the product of this thing. No one else has come to manufacture this thing for us. We've done it for ourselves. So introspection helps us to be able to get the necessary places, know where we can learn from our mistakes, and also help us to get forward, not to get behind in everything.
And interestingly enough, this moment that we're all living through right now is being pitched as some sort of do or die, be all, end all. And I don't think that's quite true. I think the day, June 25th, is obviously incredibly important to this country. It's as important, in my view, as our Independence Day. It's as important in that, because you know what an Independence Day is the confirmation that a social contract between the people who are being governed by and the government is signed upon, and it's one of consent, right? And I've seen people talk about the social contract between Kenya and Kenyans and its government, and their government being rewritten. Joe Kobuthi, who writes for The Elephant, had written something, and shout out Joe, it's a great article. He wrote it in 2023, and he says, Kenya on the cusp of great change. A fundamental contest between two orders is taking place in the country. Will Kenya's progressives seize the moment to catalyze a progressive vision for social, economic, and political change in society? And I guess the other question is, or will it just all go to shit, right? But we're in this really spectacularly important moment, and I feel as though especially those people who are online just hating on everybody else are doing a great disservice to themselves and to the country itself. Because this is the time when you really think about, okay, do I like how my country is being run? Do I like how my healthcare is being managed? Do I like how my taxes are being taken? Do I even like the quality of the leaders that represent me? And how do I get to that point when I see a vision for my country, the country of my dreams? This is that moment that we've been gifted, in a sense, by our younger generation from last year. And I just worry sometimes that we're going to waste it, right? We're going to waste it, or as happened last week, we're going to be threatened into a silence that then allows for this kind of elite consensus that has always run this country to continue. And this is a perfect way to segue into why you're here, Felix. So Felix was the Africa Uncensored reporter who was behind that really harrowing footage that we all saw last week, where a hawker, Boniface Mwaniki, just selling masks, was shot in the head by a policeman at point blank range. And obviously right now, Boniface is, if what I read is to be believed, is, essentially fighting for his life or on life support. And my, first of all, like, prayers and I don't say condolences, but best wishes go to his family. They're obviously in a tough situation. But let's backtrack a little bit. Felix, where were you at that very point? And what gave you the presence of mind to point your camera in that direction to capture what is perhaps one of the most heartbreaking pieces of footage that we've seen in this country this year?
So I also send my condolences and prayers to the family. But on that day, we were in Minty House. So in Minty House, we have like, there are roads that cross each other, Moi Avenue and Kenyatta Avenue. So at that roundabout, we had like two groups. There was a group that was coming from this side, and there was a group that was coming from this side. The group that was coming from this side, which was a group of protesters, they were throwing stones. This other group, which was like replying, was the police officers who were throwing the tear gas and stuff. So as people were approaching, now people started fighting from each other. So the road was like, we have 4 junctions. So when we were here, there's a road kidogo iko hapa katikati between these 2 roads here.
Yes.
So we were here at between these 2 roads. At Imenti House, once you just see the building, and you'll see in the video Azuri restaurant. You can just see it from afar.
Yeah.
But that is the junction we were at.
So like at Moi Avenue crossing towards Tomboya.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that a junction. So as we were filming, so the police were from this side. They were throwing tear gas from protesters, and they were coming from all sides. So they were throwing first from this side and this side. Then the police group now they started from this side and this side, so that they can meet them here. So as they were coming from this side, now one of the trucks was parked almost here. So when it was on this side, maybe I for a better view, maybe I wanted to see what was happening for that truck that was parked on there. So I crossed the road and came in between now the 2 lanes from this side and this side. So on that we were a lot of photographers and also journalists over there. So we were in a group of, we can put now maybe 8-10 people. Yeah, everyone had their cameras out. The police were trying to regroup now protesters from the other sides. So there was also a guy who was on his knees in the same video. Way before, he was on his knees with his hands up. So as the protesters were pushing in front, as they saw the police started firing, now they ran. At that corner, they ran back from where they were coming from. As they were now running from where they were coming from, that's where maybe the crowd dispersed. And then now it was a clear shot now of Boniface, and there was another mask seller who was before him. In the video, you can see like there were 2 people. So everyone flee from the scene. So there were 2 people who remained there, and when the police officer was coming, they passed the first guy who was selling the mask. Who was also like the mask seller with this guy. So they passed first the guy passed very nicely. So on the other side, I don't know what happened. They just like asked kama unafanya nini or something. Then suddenly, even without even
warning,
expecting, he did not even, like, no one even expect that would even happen or something. Then he was so close, he would have done something, not even shoot. Yeah. So he just pushed him or something, then suddenly there was a shot. Yeah. And after he shot, he saw, and then he walked away. Like angekuwa anataka kusaidia angesaidia, sorry. Aliona kenye amefanya, alafu akaanza kutembea kienda. So watu ndio wakaanza kusema, people started screaming, and then people started now raising their hands towards now the yeah. So when he was going back, now he's going back to the side of the truck that he was coming from. So people now started telling the other members from the truck, like, cease fire, something is happening here and everything. Very brave people were coming. I was like almost the first guys. We were there. So as I went there was a brave guy who like swung into action. Alikuwa amevaa kofia, akachukua kofia yake akaanza kumshikilia damu hivi. Alafu other people started coming. They started trying to stop the blood with a scarf. Then someone started performing some CPR. Yeah, you would see like the blood, and you just see blood and the constituents maybe of the head or something, like just lying on the floor. Then it was like blood everywhere. People were just screaming. People were just coming to see, and then they go back. They wouldn't even believe like this was happening and everything. Then after some few minutes, I think after the person who was performing CPR, I don't know what happened or what determination they got into. Suddenly now they stopped performing the CPR and started carrying him around town. Now that's where maybe the photos of him being carried by the people now, protesters who are now carrying him and like, hey, now the police started. Now a large group of people now came. Now it was like involving almost everyone who was in town. Hata kama huko town ku protest, like, hey, wameua mse aje. Now we started seeing like large crowds of people started gathering. But it was a horrific experience, to say the least, but a very experience that it would not have happened if someone else would have just buried someone. Hata angemuongelesha.
You know, the thing that I wondered when I saw that footage was, had it got to the point where the police needed to use live ammunition? Had it gotten to that point in the protest at all? Like, what was the provocation? Because a number of people who, when they saw the footage was ours, like DM'd me and were asking me, Kwani, what did this guy do? You know, what did he do to provoke that kind of behavior? And you know, it's kind of sad that you'd have to ask that, but I guess I understand where it's coming from, because it seems so arbitrary. And so I wondered to myself whether it had reached, you know, there's points in a protest that reach almost fever pitch, or like a climax where there's just, you know, like it's a head-on clash. But did it seem like that for you?
If I would even be the guy's lawyer, I would say, the guy, first, there were 2 policemen. He's alone. 2, if he was even protesting or even causing the havoc that they were claiming to be, angepotea hata yeye. You cannot be there abusing someone, alafu akikuja hii side yako kukaribia, wewe unasimama hapo. It beats even the purpose. So aliona he was peaceful, alafu alisonga kando. If you can see the video, amesonga kando. Even there's a famous video of like him, when unaenda kupiga mtu kofi anajaribu kublock. There is a shot that you can see, like there's a picture of him like trying to block the knee on his face. And also if he said even something, sorry to say, even something bad, nataka umshoot, umetusiwa unasikia uchungu ushoot. It does not make sense.
It doesn't make sense. So for you, it didn't.
The pain, it's not, he did not even do anything. Like it was just,
It was unwarranted.
Maybe kwa bahati mbaya, huyo mwingine anasema ni bahati mbaya, but hiyo si bahati mbaya.
Justine, how did you absorb that moment?
I think one of the things that keeps standing out to me from all the footage that we see of police brutality, it's like they do not care and they do not feel like there's any consequences. It's almost like they have the right to do what they're doing. Because where Boniface was standing, regardless of what he had done, what he had said, even if when people DM you and ask you what had he said, what had he done, that's trying to justify someone being harmed. That is still wrong.
True.
If there's any procedures of arrest, or like if someone is overstepping or they're doing something wrong, there should always be consequences that are guided by at least some kind of de-escalation tactic instead of shooting someone. And this just speaks to, like when I saw that video, this just speaks to the level of violence that a lot of poor people experience, because I don't think there's any way for me to describe this outside of just like, this is hatred for a person who you believe their life is expendable.
It's worthless.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
how a lot of poor people are treated. We've seen it not just with Boniface. We saw it with the 19-year-old kid who was shot. Like, if you see the footage of the police officer, they just took out their gun, pointed it, and fired.
Yeah.
They were not in danger. They were not being provoked. They felt like in this moment they could shoot and there's no consequences, because he literally shot, got onto a boda boda, and they rode off.
And you know the strange thing, again, in both protests, the protests were about an injustice that had happened to someone else.
Yes.
So in Boniface Moneki's case, you know, it was a protest about the murder of Albert Ojwang. I think we can now safely just establish that it was indeed murder, right? And then I'm just trying to find his name here. His name was Stephen Joshua Nderito.
Yes.
It was over the murder, the rape and murder of a young girl.
Yes.
And this is why the beauty of the moment also meets the brutality of our past, in that you can tell that Kenyans are more actively engaged with in talking about the welfare of their fellow Kenyan, right? And not just from a point of view of, oh, that's sad. Like, oh, it's sad, but we're actually on the streets demonstrating our anger or our sadness about it, and also trying to figure out ways to be able to help the situation, to bring attention to the question of femicide, to bring attention to the question of police brutality. And yet, this new, I don't want to call it new, but this reawakened, you know, persona that we are seeing in Kenyans is being very, very like brutally fought by an older order. And this is why I think for me, in as much as these are sad moments, the thing that I'm trying to draw from it is that the silver lining that I'm trying to draw from it is that contest, we can all see that this is the contest between the old order, where there's elite consensus backed by the barrel of a gun within the police force, or violence that's paid for, because that's another thing that we ought to talk about, versus the idea that it is one Kenyan whose welfare, whose status doesn't matter as long as an injustice has been perpetrated against them. We shall all speak up for these people. So that for me is the beauty of this moment, in as much as there's been a lot of darkness in the week past.
And just to add to this, I think one of the things that I think a lot of Kenyans, or not even Kenyans, like a lot of people across the world are standing up to, is contending with the dismissal of life, and also what that means for generations, for that family. Because I believe Boniface's dad is like, this is my child. The mom was on the cover, I think, of one of Nation, I think, just saying like they're killing our children. And this is a replicated scene so many different ways, but it's literally the exact same violence. And when you shoot someone who's out there trying to make a living, it's sending a message that poor people should just be on the lookout. You're in a war zone, not just economically or even spiritually, because like pastors are swindling people. You're also still in like the government will do everything to make sure that you actually do not leave, even if it means they have to kill you. And when you kill someone in a family, you're not just killing that person. You're killing the hopes and dreams that family had for that person. You're killing their financial contribution to the family. Maybe, like, for instance, like what happened to Albert was literally a destruction of the hope that Albert's dad had. So it's not just the devaluation of someone's life through an injustice because of police brutality. It's an economic fight. It's a spiritual fight. It's all these different things encompassed into one. Like, the brutality doesn't just end because someone was shot. The brutality is generational.
It continues. It continues. And I want to ask you a slightly off center question, Felix. I'm just going back to that, you know, when I was a young reporter, and the first time I saw violence at that level, it was bad. It was a similar situation, but it didn't wind up in a death, in a murder. how foundational do you think this is going to be, that experience is going to be for your career and how you view the country in which we live?
Actually, it really alters when you see things kwa ground na venye zinakuwa reported. Because one of the things first with the goons that people are talking about, the goons themselves were being saying that people who sent them, they are not being asked. They are volunteering the information and saying, we were sent by this person, and we are protecting the properties of this person and this person.
Tuseme, si walikuwa wanasema
Sakaja, yeah. So, you're like, wao wenyewe wanajisema, you're hiring people who don't have, sorry to say, enough intelligence to know that you don't have to say the person who sent you.
Yeah.
Two is also, it shows you a lot of impunity that happens, and in real life, it shows you how something serious can just be taken as jokes by other people on the internet. Someone else is just trying to ask questions at you. Gaido was writing, I don't know what and what. You're like, what does it, do I really have to see? Is anything that I'm saying really true? So it really makes you question a lot of things, and you really want to fight for the government even more. Like you're like, you want to be a front row member and tell people, this is what is happening, guys. Mimi nawaambia ukweli. Whoever is telling you, whatever is telling you, is just swindling you guys.
You know what I'd want to tell you, something that I was never told when I was a young reporter covering crime and seeing some of these things, and dealing with just that internal dialogue that you have with yourself when you witness something so brutal and witness something so brutal repeatedly, is don't become jaded by the things that you see in the world. Don't become embittered by the kind of violence that you see, because I've been there, right? And I've seen similar things to you. I think use this moment to kind of, yes, shape the way you look at the world, but not to let that moment shape you, right? And I know it sounds weird and kind of silly for me to say this, but it's important for you to do that, because you will walk through so many more of these kinds of things throughout your career. And it's important to remember that these things might happen, but they're not happening to you, but they certainly are things that are opinion shaping and shaping of your worldview. Don't let it embitter you. I know so many journalists who have gone, off the rails because of the things that they've seen, and are unable to just come to grips with kind of the things that they've been able to report. And I understand where that comes from. I understand that deep, just reckoning with some of the things that are happening. So I guess one older head to a younger guy, just, I don't even know how to say it. Don't let this moment pass as one of those things that you just report, but at the same time, don't let it form who you are as a reporter. Don't let it embitter you and bring you to that level where you're just so embittered and so jaded by what happens that you're unable to see the beauty in the world. Yeah. So just my 2 cents. I thought
I can also add.
Yeah.
The death, when that guy, what happens in that scene?
Yeah.
It really made me ask myself questions like the next day, like, any we alienda job asubuhi jioni akurudi. Yeah, so like what is life? You get someone else can just decide, yani wewe ni leo. Yani wewe, yani amekaa tu mahali a decide. Yani wewe ni leo. It really makes yourself ask more questions, like who's calling the shots? Am I really in charge of things? But it's all grace and also a learning experience.
True, learning experience, but I like what you said at the end there, just to keep on looking for the answers and keep on searching for the truth. That's I think, one of the better experiences that you can have from this. Justine, this week, as we had mentioned, I won't even lie, like I told you offset, I'm really feeling the heaviness of this week. In as much as I told you not to feel that, I'm really feeling the heaviness of this week. And perhaps it's because I've been so involved with producing the documentary, that reliving some of the things that we saw, some of the things that we all witnessed as a country, has made me just come to a reckoning of the heaviness, but also the significance of this moment. Because I don't want to look at it only as a moment where there was death and despondency, in as much as that was a very big part of what happened last year. But I really, as I'd mentioned, wanted to see both the death, the difficulty, and the many unanswered questions, and the things that we haven't been able to move forward on, but also see other parts of it. But we most certainly have to reckon with and remember that people died. But not just people died, people were killed.
People were killed.
Right? We have about 62 names here of people who passed on, who were killed during the Gen Z protests. And we'd like to read out every one of those names. So Justine, I'll let you start.
Brian Lemayan Kasaine from Narok, Austin Makoha, Nakuru, Mike Kihunga Nyaguthi, Nakuru, Kelvin Madanga, Nakuru, Kennedy Onyango, he was 12 years old, Rongai, Anthony Kimeu, Rongai, Rex Kanyike Masai, he was shot in Nairobi. I'm going to try not to read all the cities, I'll read all their names. Matthew Njoroge, Kevin Mwawasi, Beasley Kogi, David Chege, Erickson Kialo Mutisia, Ibrahim Kamau Wanjiru. There's an unidentified young male adult. He was at City Mortuary. Eric Kanyoni Kieni, Evans Kiratu Karofia, Credo Oyaro, who was a Form 4 student at Kapsoya Secondary School, that's Eldoret. Caroline Shiramba, another unidentified young male in Kisii. Dennis Otieno Odwor, Emmanuel Giggs Tata, Joash Ombati, Kevin Ochieng, Anthony Masharia Mwangi. He was 17 years old. He was a Form 4 student at Isebania Boys High School. Denzel Omondi, Kennedy Odhiambo, Wilson Sitati, Kennedy Njeru, Duncan Onsongo, Chris Kitonga.
All right, so I'll read the next 30. Carlton Mwangi, Ernest Kanyi, Brian Kimathi, Bernard Kiplagat, Francis Kipkorir Sawe, Cholding Malang, David Shaban Baraza, Clinton Mwavali, Brian Ezra Odhiambo, Bernard Mungai Ndwati, Dennis Juma, Pantaleo Nakara, Braxton Omai Mogesi, Ben Scott Onyango, alias Benson Bithi Ouma, was killed in Kisumu. John Boydras, Timothy Moshui Kalwenya, Wycliffe Kane Mwende, Daniel Kakai was killed in Bungoma. Timothy Miheso, Charles Owino, Alex Muteti, Dennis Libanga, Shakil Obienge, Abdekadir Saadia, John Musili Mulwa, Regan Ouko, Ian Ochieng, Tilen Odhiambo, Isaac Njogona Mbogwa, Samuel Mutisia. And from this year, rather the past few weeks, Albert Ojwang and Stephen Joshua Nderito was killed this past weekend. May you all rest in peace. We remember you. We remember your lives. Our prayers go to your families and to everybody who loved you. Remember that there are many, many people who are thinking about you in this moment. And may God grant all of us the strength and the grace to continue on while honoring these young people who died, who gave their lives in a moment of great reckoning for this country. May you all rest in eternal peace. I can tell you that in my 20 or so years of being a journalist, I've never had to read a list that long of young people who were killed essentially by their government. And while we want to draw lessons from this moment, I hope one of the lessons is that we really should be ashamed. We really ought to be ashamed that it was our own countrymen who did this to young people.
And for nothing other than it's a bill. It was really just a bill. It's a piece of legislation, and I'll address this a little later. But I think one of the things that we forget, that in the midst of all this tragedy, there were still femicide cases that were completely dismissed, like the bodies of the women that were found in Kware. The investigation is incomplete.
The suspect is still at large.
Yes, and there's no consequences whatsoever.
You know, again, Justine, I'm really, really trying to pull for the positive here, but there's nothing that I can say that could misdirect, people's attention from this very cold, hard fact that there are people who are now dead because of this. What I'm hoping that people at home and people who are watching, wherever they're watching, remember is that this moment, as we started out by saying, this moment that we are all in as a country is really one that we shouldn't let pass, if only for the reason that there are people who we must memorialize at this time and going forward, if only because their lives mattered, their futures mattered, and they were in many ways you and me. They were no different from you and I. And that not just that this could happen to anybody, but that this should not happen in our country again. This is what I believe in our heart of hearts. Anyone who's a real believer in the promise of this country should be thinking about at this point in time. So I really hope and pray that the week that we are going through this week will not wind up in us reading more names. That, sorry, go ahead, yeah.
We're tired. Honestly, I think one of the most difficult things to go through again and again, and this is something I had brought up a few weeks earlier, a lot of the names that we are learning from Kenyans should be from things that they've achieved.
True.
Things that they've helped shape this country. And I know in a way, them being out there on the 25th of June, or anyone who's just out there trying to build this economy in any way, building something for their family, those people are important. The day-to-day people who the state deems invisible and expendable, those people are important. So we need to learn names of Kenyans not through tragedy. We don't need to learn any more names because a police officer felt they were insulted enough to shoot, or this person was someone they could dismiss enough to open fire and change the trajectory of their entire life or the entire life of their families, because they couldn't in that moment have good judgment or withhold themselves from meting out violence on people who literally are unarmed. So if we're really to reckon with this moment, it's not about telling police officers what to do. I think the Kenya police is literally a colonial institution. It still upholds the very, very things that has harmed generations of people. There's no reforming such an institution. Honestly, it should be abolished. They should build from the ground up any kind of policing features that are built in the community that protects people, that values people's lives first. Everything else after, arming people, shooting them down, hunting them from their homes. And even I believe this is someone who had tweeted that there's police officers in Nyanza who went to Alberto Juang's home and they brought rice and vegetables And I'm like, I guess, but as an institution, that's also a form of terrorism because that very institution harmed this family in such a horrible way, and they still get to waltz in and commune with their family and be like, we're sorry, or like the president's like, Shikeni 2 million. It's still a devaluation of life even after the fact.
That's true.
Because the only thing that would make anyone believe that this regime, even in the slightest bit, cares is if there was justice for Albert. There was justice for all the 60 victims of police violence and all this violence we keep seeing that happened in 25th June in 2024, and even the days before that, and every day after, to the people who've been abducted. If that doesn't happen, every single act of, oh, we are sorry, this will never happen again, that's just more gaslighting and terrorism, and we can't live like that.
Speaking of which, there are people who are still missing. I just want to find the name of the young man who is still missing.
Think
since June the 25th. Let's see, I've got it over here. His name is Peter Masharia, and he has been missing since June the 25th. KNH says that he was treated, discharged for gunshot wounds, but he hasn't been seen since, and his family is looking for them. So for anyone who is out there still looking for their family members, you know, please try and raise it with the media that you trust, the people that you trust, to see whether there's members of the public who can also help in this search. Yes. And before I move to something else, a question that I wanted to ask, one of the things that I found that to have been, again, one of the positives to take from that week was how people used open source intelligence to search for the perpetrators of the crime that we saw unfold in front of all of us. That, I think, was really impressive, and a demonstration of just how, when the public bands together to do something for the welfare of one person, it can really yield remarkable results, because it brought real pressure to the police force. Yes. Remember, they had refused even to release the name.
Yes.
And I say this advisedly, because there are circumstances where people who are innocent of crimes have their names put out there,
yes,
but and targeted. But this, you could see, was an incredibly determined and methodical search by a lot of people out there and deploying their skills to the greater good, which I thought was really something. But you raise something important when we're talking about justice for the victims, which is there was something that was broken last year. And there doesn't seem to have been like a real attempt to fix it. And it might not even be one thing. I think it's many things. But for the people who are sitting at home listening to us, or the people who are even just considering this question, Justine, how, if it were up to you, if you had a magic wand, or you had the Bible and the sword, how do you rebuild trust? How do you rebuild trust between yourself as a representative of the government and the public? Because let's face it, the thing started initially as a finance bill. It has crystallized into this Ruto must go call.
Yes.
How do you rebuild trust?
But like, there's no rebuilding. I think because to rebuild, there would be a sense of goodwill or acknowledgement, at least from the part or the individuals who have committed all these different atrocities. Most of these people should be resigning and just walking straight to committee. Like, the roads are open, we can get the keys for you. I think if there was enough of again, it just goes back to the word trust. If there was enough trust in the systems that are in place to be like, for this one, we're not letting it go. For this one, we're going to follow up till the end. Because we've seen what happened with Albert Ojwang's case last week, where IPOA interrogated Lagat, DIG Lagat, and then what ended up happening is the DCI then started investigating IPOA because they feel like they overstepped. And I'm like, what police centipede is that, where you actually, like, you're busy interrogating each other and investigating each other? It's very messed up.
The reference is crazy. Like the reference is crazy and disgusting, but very apt.
Yes.
Very apt.
Because we
Yeah.
have to really understand if you're to rebuild anything, if without any form of justice or even the semblance of it, we're not going anywhere. You've shattered it, and you're willing to burn every single bridge, even the ones that people who had thought they would be able to cross it with you are also now in the fire. Like it's not a conversation about how do we regain trust. It's a conversation about how do we reshape institutions that were supposed to function in a certain way so that it actually shifts. Again, just to your point to the open source intelligence and how that worked. Every single person used their skill set, right? But in its essence, that's a form of community policing. It was like making sure this particular perpetrator does not, you don't get to live freely. You don't get to enjoy the protection of the state because we will find you. We believe we're a community enough to hold you accountable for your actions, even if they want to release your name, even if they want to protect you. You don't get to walk away from this one.
That's a really interesting and great way of looking at it as community policing. That it happened online, that it happened in digital spaces doesn't mean there is any less of the community stepping in to sanction a member of that community that has done wrong. I've got a couple of comments here. Ian Kemboi, I think in reference to Felix's experience of watching what happened to Boniface, says that was a harrowing ideal. Phantom, cheers for watching again, Phantom. He's becoming one of our day ones. What does it matter what he did? There's nothing that warranted the reaction from the police. He said he still thinks brutal violence will work on an awakened citizenry. Ian Kemboi comes back. May all their souls rest in peace. They will never be forgotten. Phantom again. And for Ichung'wa to come out and say they passed the bills people fought against and died for, the insensitivity we shall revisit. And Alvin Omondi says, very volatile times. They are indeed times that you'd rather not live through, but all change and all growth, I think, is painful. I just wish that it wasn't this painful. It wasn't this difficult. Speaking of pain and weird and strange times, like we're in a twilight zone. Last week, one of the things that we did see were goons marching, in step with and almost receiving instructions from members of the police force, and I remember there being attempts to tell us that those were our lying eyes and we shouldn't believe what it is that we saw. But it really was, again, and it's not the first time that we've seen goons deployed in this way. Last year it happened.
Yes.
But do you remember earlier in the year when the president was doing his whistle-stop tours across Kasarani, sijui where, Paka guys were like, now, if the president is moving one way, just stay at home because there'll be goons in tow in your area. But it does raise a far deeper question. Not so much that the goons were used last week, which is something, unfortunately, that we've come to expect of this regime when it comes to protests, but the use of the goons itself and what it means. I know you've tried to dig into this because you saw Ronald Okoth's tweet, but like, how does that, maybe his tweet and all of the things that you've seen with regard to the goons, inform your worldview about the use of young people in political times, in heated moments?
Before I answer the good question, let me ask you, have you, because like you have been doing this work for a long time, have you ever just seen just like such open disregard or like were the guntivities, for lack of a better word, more well hidden, more we have goons, but we have decorum?
So that's a really interesting question, and I think so goons as part of political action in this country is not a new thing. Way back in the 90s, we were first introduced to the question of goonery in the KANU Youth Wingers, when the KANU Youth Wingers became part of our political lexicon, right?
Stares directly into the State House camera.
And what they were effectively, aside from the ones who were at the top, but perhaps also including them, was a youth league for a political party. And most political parties across the world have youth leagues. But how this youth league was deployed was not as like a seedbed, right, for growing or nurturing new political leadership, even though that's what happened eventually.
Yeah.
It was a tool, it was a blunt instrument where the government could exercise monopoly of violence informally without the use of the police through an instrument called the youth wingers, right? In an organization that it could control. Now, here's where it starts to change. We start to hear now different politicians having their own jeshis.
Yes.
Beginning with, if memory serves, Jeshi la Gumo. Jeshi la Gumo was Fred Gumo's personal sort of like,
Goon squad.
goon squad that
Yes.
would go and terrorize people, fight political opponents, etc. Moi allowed that.
Yes.
Because Fred Gumo was an acolyte of Daniel Arap Moi. But alongside that, we would see different political parties, different people have, in a sense, like these small goons. Like the fight for the control of Ford Kenya in the 90s was also one in which you'd see a lot of goonery, right? Raila Odinga at that time was alipigwa in Thika Stadium, essentially by Kijana Wamalwa's supporters / goons, right? But then now you start to see the personalization of goonery around a political, figure becoming a staple. I think perhaps one of the more scary or more threatening ones that people were shocked by was when Uhuru Kenyatta rode into town accompanied by Maina Njenga and hundreds of members of the Mongiki squad, which for purposes of this conversation were goons, right? Because what were they trying to show? It wasn't just that Uhuru Kenyatta was powerful, but that he had a monopoly of violence. So that, keeps on evolving across the years, across the decades, into now what we have, where an MCA will have his own squad, a governor will have his own squad, possibly a president also has his own squad outside of formal state power and control of the monopoly of violence. But that is a recipe for chaos and disaster, because not only are you demonstrating a lack of trust in the formal instruments of or the formal organizations that are supposed to have a monopoly of violence, because they are supposedly, theoretically, trained on how to use those instruments that they have been given, but also follow a specific code. Now, you have today young men who are paid 100 bob, sometimes hata walipwi, wanalipiwa 250 bob ya kufika town, and then mkafanye what you're supposed to do, alafu murudi tutawasort, tutaonana mbele, right? As part of now the political lexicon. That is a dangerous place for a country to be, because at what point are you going to say that you have these people under control?
Yes.
You know the expression, the trick of riding a tiger isn't getting on, it's getting off. Right? And this is the tiger that these politicians have chosen to ride. Let us see what happens when they try to get off.
Yeah. I love that you've given a little bit of the history of goons, because they've openly been used. And I think right now the little bit of change is people can't speak directly to the goons. Like, you don't just get to live in a corner and enjoy your goonery.
And then
and go
be
home.
that guy who's just brooding and silent in the corner that nobody can approach.
Yes, because again, you don't have a monopoly on violence. You have to always remember, if you are harming another person, that person can retaliate. And I know this can become a very volatile, toxic situation that spirals into something even bigger, more dangerous. But at its core, a lot of the goons we've seen openly walking around, yelling Sakaja's name, being so proud of, quote unquote, protecting the city, while also stealing from regular Kenyans and grabbing things from shops, even cops grabbing laptops and telling them, oh, we didn't just steal them, we transferred them to Central Police Station. Who told you the laptops need to be transferred temporarily? Return them to the shop. So at its core, it's a lot of the people we see as goons, and we kind of tend to forget to look at them as people who've been disenfranchised.
To humanize them.
Yes.
Yes.
You have to humanize and experience some time to understand. There are people who have given up on life and they think they enjoy gunnery because it pays them money. Yes. But then there's a bunch of people who have literally been removed from a different future that they would have had. So a lot of circumstances, especially when you're dealing with people who have experienced very, very, very vicious levels of poverty, it's very, very dangerous for them to be in a situation where someone can manipulate them and promise them money.
Yeah.
Because that's, a lot of people are, and this is the discussion we were having a little earlier with Barack, our producer, where he was saying money is emotional. People are thinking, oh, I'll get to eat, I'll get to be able to take care of my kid or something. Like they are attaching the idea of getting some money to this just little thing of violence that I can do. And they feel like they can get away with it. And they feel like, oh, if I get 2,000 here, or if I get, it's like money I would not have made any other way.
True.
So the experience of poverty actually reshapes how people look at what violence they're perpetrating, because they feel like they can earn money. The problem is, you guys are trusting people who don't even pay vendors. You're trusting people who are actually, they're stealing Kenyans' money. You think it's you who will be special. And also, like, if someone is giving you 50 bob, but promising you to give you 2,000, hiyo ni bet imeshachomeka. Like, you can't, I'll use like terms like a lot of people are, like, your bet imechomeka, because how are you trusting that your bet tender through?
Haiwezi.
Because you're betting on someone who's a liar. If they give you that 2,000 up front, maybe I would understand. Like, you actually have incentive to be out there.
Yeah.
But if someone is giving you 50 bob, promising you 2,000 shillings, that's 2,050, where you only have the less of the equation at hand. So I think even if you don't know math, you unaweza fikiria tu vile unafanya betting. Why would you take 50 bob to get 2,000 later? It's not even a long-term investment. You might end up in hospital. You might end up dead. They might actually round you up and say you people are criminals, and then you might end up in jail.
Yep.
And I don't know how to convince everyday people who've been systematically disenfranchised with poverty how not to make those choices, but just don't make the easiest choice for someone who has power and can harm you.
You know, enough said. Enough said, because I don't even know what else there is to add. Perhaps with the exception of saying that it is yes about being disenfranchised to a certain level. It is about that, but as callous as this may seem, there's a choice.
It always is.
There always is a choice. And the choice that you're making could leave you dead.
Yes.
Right? You know, the choice that you're making is such an important choice you don't realize. And even though you seem to think that your life perhaps, you know, doesn't go beyond the 100 bob or the 200 bob, etc., that you get on a daily basis, there are people who value you.
Yes.
So I guess have some value for yourself.
Yes.
But it's a difficult thing to say, you know, when I sit here in my comfortable studio saying that, you know, you should have some value for yourself when I don't know what living through something like that looks like. But at the end of the day, I think there still is a choice.
There's always a choice.
There's always a choice, man.
And I really wish, even if there's always a personal choice involved, I really wish more people were accorded better choices in general, so they'd never have to choose between their own lives and a 50 shilling note. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, we're at such an important stage in our political growth as a country, as a political journey, that all of us must be focused.
Yes.
Sahi ni wakati wa kufocus,
You
by
need
the way.
to lock it.
Lock the hell in right now, because if we don't, by the way, mambo inaenda segemnege, we don't even know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Speaking of the goons, Sakaja, Johnson Sakaja, the governor of Nairobi City County, has come out after, I think, a weekend of being blamed essentially for having financed and mobilized these young men to come and commit some goonery in the city, saying that it's not him, that it is political opponents that are trying to throw dirt on his name, and that he would never, never do something like that. Now, while I'm of the view that, he also has his point of view and he probably also has evidence to, to possibly vindicate himself, I would ask then, why didn't you come out sooner and not only disown this being attached to your name, but come out and defend the city against this kind of activity.
Yeah.
You can't stay silent over an entire weekend only to come back and say, by this, me. Like the city, literally, people voted for you to become the governor of the city so that you could protect the city.
Yeah.
And what were people saying as they were passing the governor's office? Igwe, Sakaja, tunalida. Exactly.
That's literally your language.
So unless what you're trying to say is that those guys were told to say that when they were passing in front of, it's not outside the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
My thing is that you had the opportunity all weekend to say something. You had the opportunity on the day when things were happening to come out and say that.
Yes,
right?
and even stop it, because you do actually run this county. You're not like some bystander. You're not literally being, like, people were around your offices. And that's in the heart of the city.
If they were so endeared to him, there would have been no danger of him coming out to those steps there and saying, guys, what you're doing is wrong, right? So some political maturity beyond denial of what has happened.
After the fact.
is really what we're looking for in leadership in this city.
Yeah.
And it's not enough to come out after the fact and say it. It's not enough to come out after the fact and deny it and make it look like it's some sort of political game when people's livelihoods have been affected.
Yes.
But then interestingly, you come out and deny and say that it's not you and da. But on the other side, politicians are all saying that, this is why we should not have protests, because there's supposedly goonery, right? When we can clearly see that these people have been deployed by someone. So Governor Sakaja, do better.
Sakaja, the vibe of the city is not gooding.
Yeah.
You have to get it together.
Yeah, for real. And look, we might come across as being highly critical of you, but this is an important issue.
Yeah. You and Nosiria should just get together and do something that is not like a promo for a club. You guys need to get it together. It's literally such a...
there's another very important city. Stop it.
It's such a mindfuck. What are you doing? Honestly, and this is for that Mosiria person. Honestly, the city is flooding, and you telling people should pick up after themselves and everything. And there's just one dustbin every 3 business streets. What are we supposed to do? And then you're telling us, I know you're in love with dustbins, but this city actually needs storm drainages. We actually need to fix the things that are essentially the infrastructure. And if that can't be done, by the way, you can just say tumeshindwa. We don't want to keep seeing you doing ads for dustbins you're in paid partnership with trash. You need to lock in and do your job. If you can't fix the infrastructure, please don't talk to us, because it's not going to work.
Umesema watu na trash wana collaborate Instagram, paid partnerships. Oh my God, Justine. I've just seen actually Ken Ochieng. He's a lawyer who was accosted and robbed. And he says that the police stood by. Now, again, Justine, I know it's an unfair situation to put you, but if this was Justine's city, how do you go about, again, because there are a lot of people who are wondering about this in view of what's going to happen on Wednesday. How do you go about guaranteeing just regular folks like this and people who perhaps want to come out on Wednesday and exercise their rights, that this is not going to happen to you. This is not going to happen again. Beyond the guarantees, what kind of action do you think we ought to be thinking about to be able to do this?
I think it's actually very simple. Every single protest is supposed to disrupt. Protests are not about to be about people being comfortable and I can, yeah, maybe some people will be able to do business, but if you remember the first protests that happened even on June 25th last year,
Yeah.
people were walking. It was a procession of like, yeah, we're going to disrupt your business. It's going to be hard for people to come through to the shops. They have to walk around and walk in crowds and everything. But that's the purpose of the protest. Someone has to listen. It's a little bit of pressure here so that works. If you're really worried about the businesses, instead of police literally hounding protesters, walking hand to hand in goons, they could land their shops.
Yeah. And protect the business.
Yes, if that's like such an important part of the economy, then you protect the things. Don't go into people's shops. Don't attack the business owners. Don't attack people. Let them line the shops, because during the anti-femicide march, I think it was in January.
In January. It was in January last year.
The procession literally went around the city. No business was disrupted. The police didn't beat anyone. And I'm like, okay, if you can do that, and maybe not even maybe, I'm sure there was a lot of processes that went through to talking to the law enforcement and making sure that no one is harmed, because we know how they are.
True.
So if that is possible, then why is it impossible for them to do the right thing again and again and again? It's a matter of choice. So if they are continually refusing to do this, it's not just a choice, but it's probably even an order. Something more insidious that we can't see, but is actually there, that allows them to act with such impunity.
You know, I saw a police officer, a fairly senior police officer last week, and I'm sorry, I forgot his name, but I saw him issue a press statement, and he actually went in front of cameras and said, like, we are preparing to protect protesters next week. That somehow got lost in all of the news from some of the things that came out as the week progressed, including, which I think was being referenced here by Phantom, that statement by Kimani Ichung'wah that the things that people were fighting for were passed quietly, there was no protest, etc., etc. Essentially just like dismissing what happened yesterday, what happened last year, right? So I really hope that the police officer who was talking last week is going to back those words with the action of actually seeing the police, as you mentioned, protect protesters, protect whoever it is who wants to come out onto the street and demonstrate and exercise their rights. And I know that my rights stop where yours begin, etc., etc. But this is not something that we ought to be negotiating about. These are our rights to talk about some of the things that are happening in this country. And as we mentioned at the beginning of this show, this might as well have been, you know, as important a holiday or as important a date as, you know, Jamhuri, Madaraka Day, etc., because it is a renewal of the mind that seems to be taking place.
Never forget.
And yes, and not to forget. A couple of comments here. Two that I'm going to read. Eric Mugendi, shout out Eric. Some of the people involved in protests were identified as footballers whose prospects were dashed when the field they were playing were in. Let me see this again. So some of the people who involved in the protests were identified as footballers whose prospects were dashed when the field where they play was grabbed. They were robbed of their future. Vicious cycle. I think, again, speaking to some of the more insidious impacts of corruption, when, you know, in the 90s, we used to have all of these news articles where they would say, oh, this piece of land was grabbed by a private developer. And they never named the private developer.
Yes.
Like, that thing used to frustrate me to no end. Like, who is this private developer?
Yeah.
And I remember there was a time, I think even Ridiculous started to mock the phrase by saying anybody mwenye akona kitambi anakaa mdosi ni private developer, right? But these things that we think have no victims, you will have victims in ways that we couldn't even imagine.
Yes.
Because you saw that ref.
Yes.
Right? Like that guy, I don't think in his wildest dreams imagined that he would be in a newspaper or online being outed because of the things that he did as a consequence of those things that happened to him much, much earlier. So Eric, very astute of you. Barak. No, he's responding to your comment. One dustbin every 3 business streets. Yeah, hey man, Justin, where you came up with that one? Ama ulikuwa na revise?
Mimi bedhe, hater at heart.
Yeah.
Hii ni job bana.
Hey, speaking of haters and hate, our final topic of the day. You know, McKenna told me on Saturday. Actually, this is a good way to start. Like, if someone asks you, hey, what are you doing on Friday?
Yes.
By the way, tell them, sijui, because the way this week is looking,
Yes.
tukianzia na Wednesday. Alafu now with all of the things that are happening and have happened over the past week with Iran, Israel, and United States, Friday is looking pretty far. It's looking far. Like, it's, you know,
Could end.
it could end before Friday, you know, because...
Do you think when the world ends, it'll write the end in the sky?
Kana ufala.
It would be so fun if that's just like a giant movie.
Or like it just needs to black like
Yes,
cartoon.
yes. Like a Looney Tunes.
I'm telling you, man, for real. Justine, anyway. So, look, lots of things happening on the international front.
Yes.
We spoke about, actually before we go to Iran, there's something that Ruto's senior economic advisor, we'll just touch on this briefly, Moses Kuria. He predicted that 2027 will mirror Kenya's historic 2002. It was a moment of broad political consensus that swept Mwai Kibaki to power. The soundbite that I heard where he was elucidating this point was that essentially it's a contest between people who are vengeful and let's burn this thing down, led by Rigathi Gachagua, and the rest of the country who are more moderate, etc., etc. I think that's a complete mischaracterization of what this movement is. Number one, because Rigathi Gachagua was not responsible for what happened last year. If anything, he was saying that it would not have happened if the NIS had done its job, right? Essentially saying that the political order would have been kept in place had the NIS done its job. So number one, perhaps because of the situation that we're in now, he sees an opportunity. But I think a lot of people, a good number of people, beyond the whole high cousins and, you know, and all of that, all of the memeable stuff that Rigathi is doing, kind of see through the game that he's playing. And number two, I felt like Moses Kuria was talking about broad political consensus from the point of view of there being another, you know, wazee wakae chini. Actually, that's what he said. And that again misses the point about this time that we're in. Yes. The entire point of why we are where we are today is because young people chose to speak up. Now, if you're saying, and maybe for argument's sake, if you're saying then that the people who eventually will rise to power are older, or that there'll be some sort of political consensus that comes up with a candidate, etc., that's fine. But you cannot put them in the center of the frame, ignoring that a new social contract essentially is being written. And it's being written at the behest of young people. Yes. So the moment is not a moment for elite consensus. Elite consensus might happen because of the moment that has preceded it, and possibly might not even happen in the way that he predicts. So for me, I had a problem with that kind of analysis, and I felt like it was, to use your words, manufacturing some sort of narrative to then now come out and say, okay, sawa, wazee wanakaa chini, so tutulie, kila mtu atulie. Ulionaje?
Honestly, I don't take anything that man says. He's like, seriously, because he has had like those trajectories in their career where his like entire political life sparked through hate speech, and then he he almost lost a fight to a blanket, and then he came back, and then, you know, like he has like those political careers that you cannot trust because he's essentially never stood for anything. So whenever he stands out and he's like, what is happening is unfair, we should center sijui who, this is happening, old people come here, they talk. No one wants to talk to old people. Kenyans, like a lot of young Kenyans have run over just this year. People online have been running the foreign policy, calling out the PS, being like, you cannot be saying this about Sudan and using a deepfake video. That is Kenyans doing foreign policy work for the for the PS himself
Yeah.
and that entire institution. We've seen Kenyans say you can't allow a Kenyan to be in Tanzania, be tortured, be sexually assaulted, and then when they come back to the country, you don't even say
Don't say
anything.
nothing.
You don't get to hold, Tanzania, the Tanzanian president is the love of our life, but we don't like the Kenyan people. You actually can't have a two-way about it in the diminishing of the lives of Kenyans. We've seen Kenyans talk about political issues, how to do civic engagement, how to publicly participate, and all these things have been people-centered. They have decentered the elite, the political class, and their shenanigans because they understand in this moment in time, we need to figure out how to talk to each other. We need to figure out how to talk about the country in a way that our interests are centered. And that's why I can't take this seriously, whether he sees it as a consensus, whether he sees like old people will be a nirvana of sorts. I am not going to engage with someone who does not even care to think that young Kenyans are the ones who have reshaped this entire moment. Whether he wants to be in a fight with Gachagua, bro, tafuteni ring, leave us out of it.
And then mkapigane.
Yeah, yeah, we don't have time.
Look, I completely agree. And, you know, Moses Kuria is many things, right? As you've mentioned, and you've elucidated which ones, blankets included, right? But, and I'll say this for him, he's not a foolish man. He's not a stupid man at all, right? And, so, well, okay, this is my analysis of the man. I don't think that he's a foolish person. I don't. Now and again, he does say some things that can surprise you. Like, for instance, I'll give you an example. In 2019, 2020, was it? Or maybe 2021, he came out and apologized to Kenyans, saying effectively that Parliament had not done its oversight job, it had misled Kenyans, it had cheated them about the situation in debt. Now, whether he was saying that out of political convenience or not, credit to him that he said it. The problem that I have with a person who has occupied these positions for as long as he has, and then attempts to impose this view that the consensus that can only move this country forward is consensus between old people, is that he ignores so many things about this country and what it is today, right? Yes, capital is largely held by people who are older, right? But in a sense, youth, the energy of youth and the population, right, is a factor of production, economically speaking. We were just speaking in terms of hard economic terms. Secondly, young people constitute a majority in this country. There is no way that you can say that the conversation will be had only by a specific elite, wazee wakae chini, when it is young people who essentially are the engine for the success of this country. And the successes are many. The successes are legion, right? Third, this is not the time to, and people might fight me on this, but this is not the time to start pronouncing yourself about who is important and who isn't in a political discussion of the country, when we have not yet dealt with the many impacts of what happened last year, number one. And number two, when we're in such a deep hole, part of which his job is actually fixing, right? I feel like it was, kind of inappropriate to say so. However, this is a free country. He has his right to speak. And we give him that right to speak wherever it is that he's speaking. I just think that Kenyans are a lot wiser to what happens in this country now, especially with the manufacturing of narratives, e.g. tyranny of numbers, right? These are the sorts of things that start to get repeated that then now people start to believe, hey, yenyewe actually is tyranny of numbers, and therefore my candidate cannot succeed, and therefore I must vote one way, otherwise nitaachwa na basi. Hautaachwa na kitu, right? Today, vote for
Utapanda to the wrong one.
Exactly, right? But vote for the thing that, the person, vote for the interest that aligns most closely with what your own personal beliefs, interests are, and the prurient interest, obviously, for the public. So with that said, let's now move to more, existential issues, as I'd like to call them, with what's happening in the United States, with Israel and with Iran. Obviously, there's been quite a storm over the past couple of weeks over the, I don't want to call it argy-bargy now, because it's moved way past that into an actual hot war, in a sense, between Iran and Israel. Israel had threatened airstrikes. Iran had said we'll retaliate, but they were negotiating. Both between Israel, the United States, and Iran, with regard to its nuclear program, but also on other fronts with regard to a peaceful settlement of that conflict. Then the U.S. comes out and makes a strike, and Donald Trump copies the march. I don't know whether you clocked that. You remember that the march down the open doorways to the camera when Barack Obama announced that Osama bin Laden had been killed. It was really reminiscent of that, and I was like, this guy is really a showman. And he comes and announces that 3 sites have been hit. Iran is like, well, did you really hit them? And there's that controversy. But what it does thrust upon the world is the real possibility of many other countries being involved in a conflict that they had no part in starting or no interest in participating in, because Iran sits at a very strategic part of the world, which is the Strait of Hormuz. So the Strait of Hormuz, I think, and they're on the northern side of the Strait of Hormuz. It is a very narrow corridor through which 25% of all of the world's oil passes through. There has been some sort of approval that now is going to go through Parliament to block the Strait of Hormuz. And Trump, who didn't have to bomb Iran, then goes to China and says, China, help, talk to your buddy, and tell them not to close the Strait of Hormuz, knowing obviously what the impact of that would be, because there will be domestic consequences for the US over such a move that it didn't need to do, but it's causing an incredibly uncomfortable time for Donald Trump in the US. My thing is this, that we are contemplating the use of nuclear weapons in a conflict between two countries in 2025. How many years after 1945, after the dropping of bombs in Nagasaki and Hiroshima? That's 70, 80 years thereabouts, that we are contemplating that in this day and age. Tells us that, number one, the promise that the United Nations made when it was being formed, that we would never see this kind of conflict again, has been binned. That the international rules-based order is on its deathbed, if it's not already dead. If a president of a country can, in contravention of his own laws, proceed to bomb another country, again, in contravention of international law, and that there be no consequence purely because they are a powerful nation, tells you just how badly off we are. My question every time I think about this is, how do we walk back what has already happened? And how do we unring this bell so that the worst, the people who have the worst excesses are not in the driving seat at this point in time? Nitakuachia hiyo.
Yeah. Me nitaambia tu ombeni Mungu juu, because honestly, being governed by idiots, we've seen how being governed by idiots is dangerous to all of us. Because they only put their own interests first. And I think at the heart of all this, at least for the West, there's a lot of war profiteering. That is at the center hold of their the imperialist wagon. Like, they make so much money from war that they refuse to think about the welfare of their own citizens. They refuse to think about the welfare of the rest of the world. Just because you don't agree with how different people in different parts of the world live doesn't mean you're supposed to bomb them. Because you'll see a lot of the discussions around this, when people say you shouldn't bomb Iran, even if they have nuclear weapons, you were having trying to get agreements about the non-proliferation of
And they killed the chief negotiator from Iran.
Regardless of whatever discussion you want to have, you people do not want to. You don't want peace. You don't get to punch someone in the mouth first, and then you say, "Let's talk about peace." That you want a bar fight, and you want everyone else to get in on it and stop the bottles from hitting you. It's not fair. This is what I think. If you want to go to war, you don't get to trade the things that you're going to war for. You don't get to sell the guns. You don't get to sell the bombs. You just squabble up, like mwinge ring. If you're gonna fight the two of you, leave your citizens out of it. Because a lot of civilians, people want mundane lives. They like, it's almost not about you, but because a country has to protect itself and make sure that their civilians get to live normal lives. Like, you don't just get to start a war because you can. There has to be some kind of consequence that's immediate, and also your allies should be able to say, we're not going to put money behind a war.
Brilliant point, Justine, because in all of the wars that have been fought, at least in my lifetime, there's always been, especially those that are led by the United States, there's always been a coalition in a sense that has backed them. NATO has been deathly quiet on this issue, possibly also because of how Donald Trump walked out of every sort of like negotiation that they had over Ukraine and Russia. That's a completely different kettle of fish.
Do you think he's walking out, or do you think he's just like wandering off because he's tired and he can't listen anymore? I don't actually think a lot of people have the butt strength to sit through all those meetings. I doubt he has it. You've seen how his hair is. It's probably just loose and he feels like a light breeze in his brain. We don't know. I think for a lot of these world leaders, we like to think that they're smart and they're considering difficult choices, but some of it is just like, it's pushed by agendas where they get to protect their own interests at the expense of a lot of people in the global south.
That's true. Yeah. And I think if you are looking for any sign of that, look at how much dissent that this move that the United States has made has generated at home, right? So I've seen Bernie Sanders obviously just completely criticize the war. I've seen Al Gore, who I haven't seen in years, essentially come out.
It was a myth.
Hey man, I thought it was a myth.
Who is just called Al Gore? Like, it doesn't sound like a real name, honestly. I didn't know he was a real person. I know he's a real person, but like, so he does sound like...
It's like this thing that I saw on Obina's show, Matom Top Shot. Did you see that thing that was trending? Akia Mungu nitakutumia bana, jamani. Kuna chali mwingine, that guy is a storyteller. But anyway, I'll go Matom Top Shot, same was up.
And also, I think like Al Gore is like, I am Groot. You know, like that's, you know, like it's... sounds like a Guardians of the Galaxy character. Like, it's not a real person.
Oh my God, Justine. Anyway, Al Gore, the real person who was the vice president to Bill Clinton and lost very narrowly in a very heated contest election between him and George Bush, comes out and essentially says that, I think he was referencing some analysis that was done by philosophers, German philosophers who returned to Germany after the Second World War. And one of them was making an analysis of what happened in Germany. And one of the things that he said was that the distinction between what's true and what's not completely disappeared under the Nazi regime. And then he makes a very straight comparison between the moves that Donald Trump is making and the Nazi regime. That I thought was very heavy coming from a politician of his stature. Not that people haven't been saying this, but you can also tell some of the moves. And it was weird how, again, our PS for Foreign Affairs was like, yeah, you see the way foreign policy is being played, when the United States said that any visa applicants are going to have their social media sort of like crawled through and you know, Korir Singh again was like, yes, you know, and I was like, why this tacit approval? You didn't need to say anything. And I'll end with this on this whole, you know, international affairs thing. There's an Australian guy who called into a show. I forget the name of the show. I'd put it on my Instagram, describing the experience that he had when he landed in the United States and was taken to a back room and told, give us your phone or get back on the plane. We want to go through your social media. And he gave them the phone. And then obviously they downloaded everything. They basically cloned his phone.
Yes.
And then started asking him questions about posts that he had made that were anti-Trump, that were pro-Palestinian, etc., etc., etc. Now I say this because those moves tend to, as we've seen with Korir Singh, you know, talking about how, you know, politics is being played or governance is being played in this day and age, those things tend to carry over into different countries. And those moves that are being made elsewhere, don't just watch them and think that it's happening there, it won't happen here. It likely will. Bring this home completely by saying that the conversation around how to manage social media is already one that is being had very, very seriously in this country. The NIS director, Nurdin Haji, was on a stage not too long ago with a minister for information, I believe, from Rwanda, talking about how we ought to manage our social media. That conversation has been had here. And you see, I think I've seen Atwoli, I've seen Samson Cherargei, all of the usual suspects talk about social media. But ask yourself, why social media and why now? Because in my view, for even with some of the bad stuff that happens on social media, it has become the new public square. Yeah. So I just thought I'd say that as we wind up, Justine. Let me just look at some of the comments, and then I'll give you time for your final thoughts. Let's see. Alvin Omondi, in response to your paid partnership comments, like paid partnership with trash is wild. And Explorer says, Justine, nobody wants to talk to old people, smiley face.
Yes.
And then and then Phantom says, I'm with Justine, Kuria is an idiot. Well,
shout out to idiots.
Yeah.
Idiots are running the world right now, if you guys don't realize.
The views represented on this show are not the views of Africa Uncensored. Have you? This was just a comment that I was reading. Calvin Rock, hi cousin. Calvin Rock, obviously from our fact-checking desk and also from Africa Uncensored, ameenda kusoma kwa Germany. And he's like, I think the power and the potential that young people wield is grossly underutilized. It behooves, hey, Calvin, hey, dictionary nayo. It behooves us that that this power is harnessed in some way, then unleashed. A leader, maybe? I think he points at a really interesting conversation that is happening right now, which is we have done the protesting, there now needs to be organizing.
Yes.
That's a conversation I think that we should have on this show very soon. Phantom, final comment from you again. Maybe Mr. I have spoken to President Macron of France can tell us his position on the conflict. Hey, guys are finishing people. Hey, where? My guys, please. Yeah, can you finish them on your own time? Anyway, I'm joking. But thanks a lot for the comments and thanks a lot for your attention this week. Justine, your final thoughts.
Earlier, you've brought out Kimani Ichung'wah's dismissal of his comments were essentially, we passed all the things that were in the Finance Bill 2024 quietly in 2024. No one was insulted. Whatever the hell that Illuminati Oranges person said. Like, he said all that. And I want just to just point at the carelessness of this administration again. These people think our lives are a joke. They actually do believe we do not get to say anything, because I saw a newspaper article by The Standard where MPs dismissed the proposals that were sent in via email as spam. So that's how they see us. And I remember a couple of weeks ago when Tom was on the show, shout out to Tom, wishing you a quick recovery. He has Homa. He wasn't able to join us today. Like, Tom and I were discussing, and I remember XYZ had done were present for civic engagement, I think, in Turkana. There was no translator. The people who are appointed by the president, the task force that went there to listen to their thoughts about gender-based violence and femicide, were all on their phones at some point. They were telling the constituents to hurry up, and a lot of them, they didn't even care to bring a translator with them to like help with everything. It's a lady, I think named Eunice, who helped translate. And I'm thinking, this is how the state sees us. It sees us as people who should be managed. It sees that people who should be told what to do, and not constituents of contributing, contributive and productive members of society. This country is run like a classroom, and they think they are prefects, and wako nyamaza hapo ama nikuandike nikuseme kwa president. That's literally what they think they're doing. And Kenyans are like, this is not a classroom. We're a country where people who have, we understand the constitution, we have read about our rights. Even if we read the constitution until page 3, we know we have rights. The opening of the constitution is a solid, you guys come out swinging. Like that's what that's what it sounds like to us. And even if people don't know everything, they're still trying to learn. And the old political class, the Ishongwas and the people in this administration keep thinking Kenyans do not have anything to say, because in their heads, Kenyans do not have the power. They have our taxpayer money and they think that's power, but they have to remember the free education and all the institutions that were functioning before they started shafted them led us to this moment. It means that people are not just learning to enrich themselves, they're learning again to figure out how to introspect and not to repeat these very mistakes in governance, in choice making, and also in just like the dreams of the future that they have. And honestly, whether you're a goon or you're a political person, or you're a person who thinks mimifying politicians and like kicking with them is a thing that will help you get to the next point of your life, all these people are in the same space. And all of you are standing in the way of what Kenya could be. And we're not going to keep engaging you with foolishness and begging you to listen to us. We are way past that point. What this dismissal means is like, we don't get to fight the same way anymore. We get to fight differently, we get to fight more smartly, and we get to engage with the things that we want to see addressed, and we're going to win. We're going to win probably faster than Musiri is going to get over the trash in this county. So yeah, we're here to stay, and we're going to make sure that the policies that we shape in the future do not dismiss people, do not prefect manage people, but actually align with what everyday Kenyans want.
Fantastic. And I want to end with a reflection on why it is that I chose to do a retrospective documentary on the Gen Z protest as opposed to an investigation, because there's many things, there's many lines of inquiry that we could have investigated, but I chose this route because I think investigative work is important for exposure, but the work of retrospectives is important for history. And this is an historic moment for our country. This isn't the sort of moment that you just reflect on as, oh, that's a mistake that happened. This has been nothing short of a sea change for the destiny of this country. And people who, even those people who deny it because they can see and feel the power of it. Now, I called the documentary Souls on Fire. Actually, it wasn't very imaginative of me because I had used that phrase before on for a lecture that I gave earlier on this year. And it's because, as you very rightly stated, we are in the midst of a battle for the soul of this country. And it's not just us. There are countries around the continent that are in the midst of this very fight. The Togolese right now are fighting very hard against the Nasibe regime. We've seen the same, and we're talking about this, if you go back to Fees Must Fall, then to end SARS, and to what happened in Mozambique, what's been happening in Uganda, what happened in the Nkurunziza government in 2016 in Burundi, what has happened in different parts of this country, what the Frexit that happened in the Sahel and Western Africa that gave rise to leaders like Ibrahim Traore. We are seeing a sea change right now across the continent that is very difficult to ignore. So I thought, aside from encouraging people to watch the documentary, it comes out on the 25th, the anniversary of the protests. Just watch for our YouTube pages. You can subscribe and listen out for it there. I thought I'd end this episode with the last few sentences, if you will allow me, of the lecture. So this is what I said. Africa's youth have shattered the illusion that we're destined to serve under systems that were never built for us. They refuse to inherit broken institutions or accept dishonorable leadership. It's time for all of us to confront how power has shaped and misshaped our societies. In July 1990, Nelson Mandela didn't come to Kenya just to mourn Dedan Kimathi. He came to honor him, to remind us that the fight for dignity never ends. And I think this is important for people to think about. The 25th is not an end in itself. It is a page marker that marks, a milestone in a journey. The deaths of Nelson Mandela and Dedan Kimathi left wounds, but their spirits live on in this very moment, urging us to confront the worst of our nations and choose differently. Will we seize this moment or let it slip away? What will you do in the moment that you're living through? A good friend once told me that he seeks people who are not invested in Kenya's failure. I agree. What is happening now is not a breakdown. It is an investment in Kenya's success, led by its true owners, its people. Our constitution, which you very rightly referenced, demands nothing less. And it begins with these words. We, the people of Kenya, acknowledging the supremacy of the Almighty God of all creations, honoring those who heroically struggled to bring freedom and justice to our land, proud of our ethnic, cultural, and religious diversity, and determined to live in peace and unity as one indivisible sovereign nation, respectful of the environment, which is our heritage, and determined to sustain it for the benefit of future generations, committed to nurturing and protecting the well-being of the individual, the family, communities, and the nation, recognizing the aspirations of all Kenyans for a government based on the essential values of human rights, equality, freedom, democracy, social justice, and the rule of law, exercising our sovereign and inalienable right to determine the form of governance in our country, and having participated fully in the making of this constitution, adopt, enact, and give this constitution to ourselves and to our future generations. The Constitution was born in the darkest night of our nation's soul. But darkness often signifies the approach of morning. The fight for Kenya and Africa's soul is far from over. But it's not the first time, but for the first time in a long time, we the people are reclaiming who we are. We now remember what it means to fight for a better future, and more importantly, we now know what it feels like to win. Thank you for watching The Big Picture this week. Have a safe week, and God bless Kenya. We'll see you next week.